Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship Podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined by the managing editor of Horns247, Taylor Estes. We are coming to you from the dark of night after Texas's 38-20 victory over West Virginia at DKR, coming off the loss to Texas Tech, in which the defense couldn't seem to stop a runny nose, and the offense broke down at critical times. Taylor, tonight, I don't know if the game could have started any better for the Longhorns, in that the defense stuffed West Virginia's first 6 drives, and Texas's offense just kept scoring, and they go up 35-7. And then hang on. At the end, the defense started to look like the defense of the Texas Tech game, gave up a couple double-digit drives, but they did the heavy lifting in the first half, while Hudson Card probably had his best game as a Longhorn.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was a much needed win, Chip, for Texas. And you're right, the defense did kind of start to slow down a little bit in the third quarter. West Virginia in the third quarter had I think it was an 18 play drive. It ate up 7 minutes and 31 seconds on the game clock. Also on that play, West Virginia running back CJ Donaldson went down with a really scary situation, and Steve Sarkisian started his post-game press conference, wishing him well, because it was a very, very scary situation. And then, that kind of happened on that drive. And so there was a lull, kind of where not only was the defense on the field for a long time for the 7 minutes, 31 seconds of the game clock on that possession there late in the third quarter that went into the fourth quarter, they also had the really scary situation with CJ Donaldson on the field that took a while to cart him off. So I think that probably stalled them a little bit, and understandably so. And that needed to happen, obviously, because that was a really scary situation there for CJ Donaldson. But overall, I mean, I think that you have to take this for what it is. I mean, this is the third game, or no, wait, is it the fourth game of the year where Texas gave up 20 or less points. I mean, that's a good day at the office for any defense, especially going up against, some of these Big 12 offenses. Obviously, Texas Tech was a little bit different, but still holding the West Virginia offense, JT Daniels, to just 20 points. You'll take it, And so this is a much needed win before Texas goes to the Cotton Bowl to face Oklahoma. That's going to be definitely looking to rebound after their embarrassing loss on Saturday to TCU. So there's definitely a lot of work to be done, but I think this was a good day for Texas offensively and defensively.
Yeah, and Hudson Card on a day where Texas through 3 quarters had 19 carries for 31 yards. That is less than 2 yards per carry. Hudson Card needed to be really good, and he was. He finished with a 200-plus quarterback rating, 21 of 27 passing, 303 yards, 3 touchdowns, including a what he called probably not the smartest decision, but a 44-yard touchdown pass in double coverage off West Virginia defenders' hands into the hands of Xavier Worthy, who finally had that breakout game we've been waiting for, Taylor. He's been a interesting guy because he goes on and off the field with, limping. He did that in the first quarter. Then he comes back out on the field. He is running around like, the Flash or something. And he finished with 7 catches, 119 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and threw a touchdown pass on a double pass right after Hudson Card had missed Worthy on a wide open deep ball, where Worthy ran an in and up right between 2 West Virginia defenders, and Card overthrew him. Worthy did not overthrow his target. He threw a perfect 33-yard touchdown pass to tight end Jatavian Sanders for a touchdown. And so big game for Xavier Worthy. We've been waiting for that. But Hudson Card, Taylor, I mean, here we are going into OU. This is the week that Quinn Ewers was expected to be back for the OU game from that sternoclavicular sprain. Sarkisian said Ewers was available for tonight's game against West Virginia, but that Hudson Card was the healthier player. How wild would it be that Hudson Card has maybe it was his best game as a Longhorn when they had to have him throwing the ball accurately because Texas was not running the ball effectively. And yet he could be replaced by Quinn Ewers next week.
Yeah, it's really wild to think about, but when you said it right. When Steve Sarkisian in post game prior to the game first, he told Longhorn Network that Quinn Ewers was available, and then he was asked about it in post game what made him go with Hudson Card, and he said exactly that. He's the healthier of the two, but he made it a point to say, this is the healthiest they've been, but Hudson's not healthy. Like, he's been playing through injury and he's been fighting through that injury. But I think you bring up a good point. He keeps making really big plays. And the fact that he's a backup doing that, I think is just, you have, I know people are going to be critical of the passes that fall incomplete, right? Like, everyone's quick to kind of nitpick some of the mistakes and overlook some of the really good plays. I think Chip, his best play, in my opinion, in this game was in the second quarter. It was on Jatavian Sanders' second touchdown that Hudson Card actually threw to him, the 13-yard touchdown. But a few plays before that, he had pressure all on him, and he makes a leaping throw, connects right into the hands of Xavier Worthy for a 45-yard game when you thought, oh, he's going to get sacked on this play. And like, he stepped up, he jumped, made a play, and it went right into Xavier Worthy's hands to set up that touchdown. I mean, that was a huge play. He probably won't get a lot of credit because everyone's going to talk about the touchdown that happened, a few plays later on that drive. But that was really clutch. And I feel like one thing that in seeing Hudson Card, especially compared to last year, but the more reps he's gotten in games, I feel like the better he's been and the more poised he's been in the pocket. And that was always a huge question with him, and an issue with him was, Sark said it all last year, happy feet. He has happy feet. He's quick to kind of tuck it and run because he's a dual threat type of player. I feel like you've seen a lot of, I've noticed, I feel like a lot of mature plays that he's made, like in that instance, that will get overlooked because of maybe he holds on to the ball a little bit too long on a different play. But that was a huge, huge gain. And I think when that play happened, it was like, wow, like, Texas has two good quarterbacks. It's not coach speak when you hear, Steve Sarkisian talk about that. They really do have two good quarterbacks. Obviously, Quinn Ewers kind of fits more the mold that Steve Sarkisian is looking for a quarterback. So if he's, coming back before OU, that's great. But even if Hudson Card has to go against OU, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, with the way that he has shown a lot more poise and a lot more maturity, I feel like, between the 2021 version of Hudson Card and the 2022 version.
Yeah, I mean, Hudson Card saw the field tonight, saw it really pretty well. And West Virginia's defense is vulnerable in the back end, and Steve Sarkisian dialed up a game plan, knowing that West Virginia would gang up on the run, which they did, as we mentioned. 19 carries for 31 yards as a team through three quarters, but it didn't matter because Texas had built that 35-7 lead on the arm of Hudson Card, and it was impressive, and it was at home. Next week will be neutral site. It's the craziest, bestest college football game in all the land, with the Cotton Bowl divided at the 50, and that crazy environment lifts up the team with the momentum like a tidal wave, and can drown the team that is on the other end of that momentum, because the sound never goes down in the building. And I get it. OU lost today badly to TCU. Badly.
Like, oh my gosh.
TCU had 41 points at halftime and averaged almost 9 yards per carry. TCU is loaded. Kendra Miller at running back, Quentin Johnston at at receiver. Max Duggan, 5 touchdowns today, 3 passing, 2 rushing. The guy's playing the best football of his life. TCU is a problem, but OU is coming off back-to-back losses now to K-State and TCU. So they're going to be absolutely a hornet's nest coming into this game. I don't care what anyone says. It's just an incredible atmosphere, and you have to grab that momentum early in that game, be the more physical team to have a good Saturday afternoon at the State Fair of Texas and drive the other team's fans out of their end of the Cotton Bowl by the end. But OU lost its quarterback in this game. Dylan Gabriel, really savage. His head bounced off the turf. He left the game, did not return. OU played with its backup quarterback, and you wonder if Dylan Gabriel is going to be cleared to play against Texas. So there are some, things that you have to consider about that quarterback situation for both teams. And Texas probably going to have a little more success running the football. Taylor, to me, and we'll get into this obviously in our preview of the Texas OU game, but I feel a Bijan Robinson TCU game from last year coming up against Oklahoma. This could be that big carry game, that 25 to 30 carry game for Bijan Robinson coming up against Oklahoma. But a lot to build on from this win against West Virginia.
Yeah, there is a lot to build on, and it's interesting to, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, like the fact that Brent Venables' defense gave up that many points. I mean, if you're Bijan Robinson and Xavier Worthy and Quinn Ewers or whoever, anyone on offense, you've got to be, chomping at the bit here, like ready to go against that, because obviously I think that TCU really exposed what everyone was going to be expecting to be a good defense, with Brent Venables being a defensive-minded head coach, longtime defensive coordinator for Dabo Swinney at Clemson, used to coach at Oklahoma too. But I mean, this is, I think you're right. This is a prime time, I would say, for Bijan Robinson to just have a really big time game. Now, one thing Steve Sarkisian did say after the West Virginia game was that, the West Virginia kind of was selling out to stop the run, because they know it's coming. Like, and I think every opponent is going to be aware of what Bijan Robinson and the plethora of backs that Texas has, what they can actually do to a defense when they start getting going. I would not be surprised to see Oklahoma try to sell out to stop the run and stop Bijan Robinson, especially after last year. I mean, remember that one run that Bijan Robinson, it didn't go for a touchdown, but against OU, and he I think he forced 10 missed tackles on one freaking run. I mean, it was the most impressive thing ever. And I remember Reggie Bush tweeted something after, man, look at number 5 out there, repping number 5 well, or something like that, with Reggie Bush also wearing number 5 at USC, when he was kind of has that elusiveness that Bijan Robinson does have. But I feel like you got to give the ball to Bijan until they stop it, right? I mean, and even when they do stop it, as you mentioned, West Virginia really sold out to stop the run. They were successful, but it's like the dam ultimately breaks when Bijan with the type of backs that Texas has, led by Bijan Robinson. And it's going to be fascinating to see how much they rely on him, and they're probably going to have to rely on him, considering Quinn Ewers is going to be, if he is the starter, assuming he is, which this kind of falls in line with the timetable that he was expected to return is for the OU game. If he's the starter, he's going to have to probably shake off a little rust. I mean, he hasn't played since the first quarter of against Alabama, and obviously has not been entirely full go, since then. So the running game is going to be crucial, but I feel like even if the first half is bad with the running game, you don't abandon it when you have a guy like Bijan, because we talk about the run, the running performance by Texas in the first half, where Hudson Card had rely on his arm. Bijan still finished with over 100 yards rushing in the game. So the dam will break at some point, and he's the guy to break it.
Yeah, he came up big in the fourth quarter when Texas needed to got the ball back with 4 minutes and 25 seconds left, he ran it 6 straight times. 5 times for 42 yards, and then he popped a 16-yard run that effectively ended the game. So Bijan coming through when they needed him most. And yeah, Taylor, you mentioned Brent Venables' defense. That OU defense has given up an average of 48 points per game the last 2 weeks in losses to K-State and to TCU. And the loss to K-State was in Norman, and they gave up 41 points in that game. Adrian Martinez and Max Duggan both ran for over 100 yards. So it's another interesting thing to consider for Steve Sarkisian, because Hudson Card, who had a huge 3rd and 7 conversion tonight with his legs, ran for 17 yards on a drive to a Burt Auburn 45-yard field goal that put gave them their 38th points. And Hudson Card can run around. Now, we know Steve Sarkisian doesn't like to run the quarterback, but you look at the stats in these games the last 2 weeks against OU and see the quarterbacks rushing for over 100 yards. You wonder. But it was a game where I think you are, for Texas, wrapping up this game against West Virginia, you're concerned a little bit that the running game, only 31 yards on 19 carries through 3 quarters. That's you're struggling to run the football. That's all there is to it. The interior of the line is struggling, so Texas is running a lot of stretch, and that works. But the flare passes, which some people like to say, oh, that's part of the running game. We saw a little flare pass to JT Sanders to start the game. Saw a flare pass to Jordan Whittington, who got great blocks from Gunnar Helm and JT Sanders. They're running these little screens that are just down the line of scrimmage, and they're popping for good yardage. So you can say that that's part of the running game, whatever. But when you got Bijan Robinson, you expect to run the ball a little better than Texas did tonight. But Xavier Worthy breaking out was big. Hudson Card coming through was big. Jatavian Sanders, 5 catches, 2 touchdowns. Last time a tight end for Texas had 2 touchdowns in a single game was 2011, Taylor. Jatavian Sanders is going to be special, and we're seeing him become more and more of a weapon. And then, on the defensive side, giving up that 18-play drive, giving up the other double-digit drive late with dumb penalties. Deshaun Jameson retaliated, pushed a guy in his face mask. Don't do that. And then, Jahdae Barron face guards a receiver, doesn't turn and look for the ball, gets a little handsy. Jameer Johnson almost got called for a pass interference, but they looked at it and said no. And so, because he didn't turn and look for the ball either. So one question I have is, why are you rotating your corners so much when Deshaun Jameson is clearly your best corner? Jameer Johnson was in there a lot in the red zone and had a pass breakup at the 3-yard line, but also got beat badly off the line for an 8-yard slant for a touchdown because he was up on the receiver, but he didn't jam him. Ryan Watts always jams his receivers at the line, and it's why they're not completing so many passes against Ryan Watts. So, if we're nitpicking, that's where I'm nitpicking. And, but Burt Auburn comes through again, 45-yard field goal. So in a game that has been close between Texas and Oklahoma the last few years, it could come down to field goal kicking, and Burt Auburn has been money since Alabama. So, and even late in the Alabama game when he booted the 49-yarder. So, the punting's dropped off a little bit, Taylor, but Texas only punted twice against West Virginia.
I was going to say that, like they punted on the first series on offense, and then they had 4 straight touchdown drives and got the ball back obviously late in the second quarter, right before halftime, just to get a few plays in. And honestly, Xavier Worthy almost caught that Hail Mary ball. Like if you looked at that, I was like, oh my gosh, he almost caught that. And then it's kind of funny because the next tip ball that came in the end zone, he did actually bring in, which was the one that Hudson Card said, yeah, it probably wasn't the smartest play that I made or decision that I made, but he made the play on it, which is, and I feel like we got to give a lot of credit to Xavier Worthy for that, because I feel like, and I don't think it was unwarranted in any way, shape, or form, but we called him out a little bit, like we're kind of like, where's the effort? It's like if he was not getting balls directly into his hands, he wasn't really making a play or making the extra effort to make a play. And he shut that down tonight. And they're going to have to do that against moving forward in Big 12 play, regardless of who the quarterback is. They're going to need Xavier Worthy to play the way that he did against West Virginia. And that needs to be the norm, not the anomaly. But I feel like it would be unfair for me to not give him enough credit, because I feel like we both were talking about that leading into this game. Like, he's got to step up. He's got to make these plays. Like, he's got to give extra effort. Like, you have a backup quarterback in, make the extra effort. And it's like he answered it a big way. And I think you hope, if you're a Texas fan, that now that he's had that game, he's going to continue moving forward, with that type of performance, because that should be the norm for the type of talent that Xavier Worthy is.
No doubt. I mean, he should be 1,000-yard receiver for sure this year, and 10 touchdowns. I mean, that's how talented he is, and it wouldn't shock me if he went above those numbers. But he has gotten off to a slow start tonight. The breakout game: 7 catches, 119 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Taylor, I think we got to give some love defensively to some individuals. Moro Ajomo, who did not make the trip to Texas Tech last week because of an ankle injury, gets a sack early in the game, an 8-yard sack. And that helped to kill a drive of West Virginia. Barron Sorrell had a sack and a half tonight. They gave him a combined sack with DeMarvion Overshone. But Texas with no turnovers forced, but 7 tackles for loss, including 3 sacks, and a lot of twisting and stunting that was very effective up front. Texas has had success with that, and we're seeing, Ovia Gofu and Tavondre Sweat stunt. We're seeing Moro Ajomo and Barron Sorrell stunt, and it's working. And they did bring more pressure this week than they did last week against Donovan Smith. Donovan Smith more mobile than JT Daniels. DeMarvion Overshone made a note of that after the game. Felt like he would be in the pocket where they could, where those blitzes would get home. But 7 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and Jalen Ford with another double-digit tackle game to lead Texas, 14 tackles and 7 pass breakups tonight as well, Taylor. And that's strong. That's strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in a league that can be so pass happy like the Big 12, with the type of offenses that this league does have. Chip, let's take a really quick break, and then we will continue to wrap up our recap and early preview for Texas OU. We'll be right back. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will continue on here. Chip, I think you bring up a good point when you're talking about the defense. I think especially Jalen Ford. I mean, he is quietly putting together a really impressive, at least, first 5 games of the season. He had that first, was it ULM? He didn't
have one that did not have
a yeah, that's right. Yeah. And he has just really come on, it seems like, week in and week out. And he, again, as you said, led the team in tackles, 14 tackles, tackle for loss. And I feel like when he's playing this way, he makes the other guys on the defense play better, honestly. I mean, because I don't know what it is like about him. It's interesting because, like, I think everybody expected that to be DeMarvion Overshone, and this is not a knock on DeMarvion Overshone at all. I think everyone expected him to be kind of the guy that's like, oh yeah, he's leading the defense in tackles every single game, and he's the one that really is making everyone around him better. And honestly, Jalen Ford kind of, he had a really good camp, as we had reported all, throughout the month of August. And man, he's just really showed up, especially since the ULM game where he didn't record a stat. I mean, if this doesn't show you what type of mentality this player has, I don't know what will. Like the fact that he probably was embarrassed by that first performance, and now look at him. He's been the leading tackler in a number of the games. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I think 3 of the 5 games he's led the team in tackles, right? Or
Yeah,
is it 4?
at least the last 3 I know.
Yeah.
And against Alabama, he might have.
Yeah.
I think he did actually. So I think it's the last 4, and they've been double-digit tackle games for Jalen Ford. So, Jalen Ford said he told Jeff Choate, the inside linebackers coach, that he wanted to be great, and he said that Jeff Choate has held him to that and has demanded more from him, and said, "You've got to do more film study. You're the quarterback of this defense. You're the one. We're moving to more of an overshown around. There are going to be times he's going to be on the edge, and he's not going to be able to read the cues from the offense. You're always going to be right there in the middle. You have to be that guy, and you're going to make all your teammates better." Well, it's sinking in. I think we're seeing Jalen Ford put in the work, and he's a guy who, as I've said, I think he's done a really nice job in zone pass coverage. It's tough for him to try to chase these crossing routes, and he got burned up in the Tech game. And so tonight we saw the corners in the nickel playing closer to the line of scrimmage against these receivers. Ryan Watts doing a good job of redirecting, so the crossing routes didn't get him as much, although they got him late in the game in the double-digit drives that Texas gave up late. So everyone's going to test them on that, even if it's Davis Bevel at quarterback for OU next week. But yeah, Jalen Ford deserves a lot of credit. Anthony Cook continues to play good football, and kind of a tough game for Diamante Tucker Dorsey. He totally guessed wrong on the gap on the touchdown by Tony Mathis late in the game. He shot the B gap, and Mathis watched him commit and just went right through the A gap untouched for a touchdown. Can't afford to give up that gap, but the Texas defense swarmed tonight early in that game when Texas took control. And they have to do that every game, Taylor. That cannot be negotiable. That has to be an every game situation, because what we saw in the Tech game were guys getting tentative as that game got tighter, as that 31-17 lead started to disappear. We saw one guy trying to make a tackle and that tackle being broken. Whereas tonight we saw 1, 2, 3, 4 guys all around the ball. And that's what has to be the standard for Texas defense. Otherwise, especially in hostile environments, it's going to be a struggle, because that's when shades of yesteryear start to creep up, the doubt, the tentativeness, and teammates sense it, they feel it, and they start to go, uh-oh. And we did not have that tonight. Tonight was a solid performance from that defense through the first 3.5 quarters.
Yeah. So one thing I feel like I don't have the quotes in front of me from post game, but Sark was asked about like I think you asked him the question about the defense, I think, between Texas Tech and somebody, I forget. Anyway, I'm going to credit you. It may not be you, but yeah, I mean, he did say one thing. He didn't really feel like intent or effort was an issue against Texas Tech defensively. He felt like they were getting getting pressure. It's just they weren't fully getting home, or they popped the ball out and the ball Texas Tech recovered it. And he did say something, and I know some fans may not like to hear this, but I think it is kind of true. Sometimes the ball doesn't drop your way, and so he kind of, it seemed to me that he was not excusing in any way, shape, or form what happened on defense against Texas Tech. I think he took a more step back approach looking at the game film. Like, I mean, they're there. It's just they didn't finish, or and obviously he mentioned they were 7 of 20 on third downs against Texas Tech. And he's like, that's not bad even. He's like, but the 6 of 8 on fourth downs is what really just hurt us, And so he didn't feel like, or he said that he didn't feel like effort was an issue. It was more just, I think it started like wearing on them a little bit more. But the reality is, I feel like a lot of teams in this conference can put up 100 plays. I mean, look at this game. I mean, I think West Virginia had 78 plays on offense, and Texas had like 60. So, I mean, this is something where it's like, I feel like they did a good job, coming out of that Texas Tech game by answering, shutting it down, getting back to playing the way that they had been playing at home. And that needs to show up on the road, even if it's in a neutral environment like the Cotton Bowl is going to be next week, because defense is supposed to travel, right? Like that's what Chip's, I think one of Chip's Chipisms, I guess you will say, is defense travels. And this defense so far has not traveled. So they're going to be in for a test to prove that, and I think that it's going to have to show up early and often in the Cotton Bowl, especially, I mean, regardless of who OU's quarterback is, this is going to be a quarterback who's never played in the game. More times than not, the lesser experienced quarterback's usually the one that has bigger troubles early on in the Texas OU game in their career. So it's going to be something that it's going to be crucial, absolutely crucial. And they need to really just kind of follow the blueprint that they put together tonight against this West Virginia team. And, hope it shows up in the Cotton Bowl next week.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it, because we saw last year, after a great start from Texas against Oklahoma, DeMarvion Overshone had maybe the best first quarter. He had a big third down stop, and then he followed it right up with a punt block that led to a touchdown as part of Texas getting off to that 28-7 lead. And then, as the momentum shifted, Texas got tentative on defense. They started missing tackles, giving up huge plays. They're not going to face Caleb Williams. And I've said if Texas would have continued to face
Spencer Rattler,
Texas would have won by 30, because Rattler was rattled. Texas had him, and he was turning the ball over, getting frustrated, ripping his helmet off. But in came Caleb Williams. The rest is history. Caleb Williams will not be coming off the bench in this game. And, I was looking, Taylor, because we know Dylan Gabriel for Oklahoma left the game with an apparent concussion. But in the Marvin Mims, who's been a real problem for Texas, caught 4 passes for 41 yards against TCU. He came out of that game briefly, so we'll have to see. But, this, no matter who's on the field for Oklahoma, this is going to be Brent Venables' absolute Braveheart moment of the season, because these 2 straight losses with his defense giving up an average of 48 points per game is demoralizing. I mean, that is not what Oklahoma fans were expecting. Obviously, when they hired Brent Venables, they were expecting him to at least put a defense together that would keep OU in games. And this has been a nightmare for Oklahoma. And Venables' defense is really complex. I remember when we talked to Gabe Eichert on the Flagship Podcast, he talked about how complex Venables' defense is, and it's not easy to grasp. And you have to have players who can execute this thing. So, Oklahoma might be in a simplification process this week, trying to simplify things so that the OU players can play fast. that plays into the hands of Steve Sarkisian. So it'd be interesting to see what the line is in this one early on. Maybe Texas by 1.5 or 2.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think it's all going to be dependent on, as you said, on Dylan Gabriel's status for sure. But yeah, I would not be surprised if Texas opens the week as an early favorite over Oklahoma. But I don't think it's going to be something substantial like a 20-point favorite or anything along those lines.
Right. Well, and real quickly around the league before we sign off, Oklahoma State goes into Waco and handles Baylor, and Kansas does it again, beats Iowa State. Iowa State's kicker looked like he was going to throw up on himself. He had a kick to send the game into overtime. He missed it so badly.
Horrible. It
Horrible.
was so bad.
Horrible.
I think he did throw up on himself by that kick, the way it landed. I mean, it was like 20 yards left of the
I mean, Iowa State's defense holds Kansas to 14, and Kansas wins. Wow, Iowa State's offense. I mean, I don't know what you say about Lance Leipold, because Kansas' offense has been absolutely gargantuan this season. Jalen Daniels at quarterback, and they're running the ball. He's running the ball. He's a nightmare to try to track down. Texas fans remember that from last year. But Iowa State's defense just locks it down. But Hunter Deckers, Xavier Hutchinson, and the Cyclones can't move the ball against the KU defense. So, I mean, this is a crazy Big 12 season. I said K-State and Oklahoma State would play in the Big 12 title game. That's looking pretty good right now. But TCU's offense.
Kansas 5-0.
Kansas.
They're number one in the Big 12 right now. Back-to-back weeks. Number one.
Yeah. So
Kansas
hang on.
K-State Big 12 championship. Just kidding.
Yeah. The Sunflower Showdown.
Yeah.
The Big 12 title.
In the Lone Star State.
In the Lone Star State. So buckle up, kids, because this is going to be wild. It's still anybody's race when you talk about Oklahoma State, K-State, and Kansas. Texas hasn't played any of those teams yet. So, but it is 1 week at a time for these Longhorns, who have an interesting week ahead with Quinn Ewers and Hudson Card, Steve Sarkisian trying to figure out who's going to play quarterback against Oklahoma, and Oklahoma has their own quarterback issues. We will preview that one in depth in a couple days, so give us a little time to digest everything that comes out early in the week, and then we'll be back to break down the Red River Shootout, the greatest game day atmosphere in sports, in my opinion. Taylor and I will both be at the State Fair of Texas covering this one. So make sure you're over at horns247.com, jumping in the conversation. And thanks for listening, everybody, to this wrap of Texas's 38-20 victory over West Virginia. For Taylor Estes, I am Chip Brown. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Until then, stay safe and keep the faith.